Hey folks, whenever you think it's impossible to run an old game on modern systems, rest assured there's always a way, and often it's posted by some Russian dude. You know, I respect these people, because they know how to preserve retro gaming, which is a noble thing. Today I'll cover Messiah, a classic released in 2000 developed by Shine Entertainment, a legendary studio responsible for other classics like my beloved MDK. Messiah is a weird action-adventure that tries to mix various genres. Sometimes it succeeds, but other times, well, it's not very convincing. I would also add that it's quite unpolished and freaking janky, not to mention downright abstruse at times. Yeah, not much different from the stuff I usually love to cover. Story. The world of man is in trouble and needs divine intervention. Thus God chooses one of his children to cleanse evil. A Messiah. He chooses Bob. An unwilling little cherub, or Puto if you prefer, wearing a diaper and with divine abilities. And what abilities?
Bob,
Yeah?
I've got something for you to do today.
What?
I'm sending you to Earth. It's in sad shape, and I'm hoping you might straighten it up a little.
I'd rather not.
Yeah, enjoy your trip.
Bob's descent on Earth is pretty clumsy. He falls like a freaking meteor. We see Bob hit a security guard, and soon discover that he has taken control of his body. This is the great ability of Bob and main gimmick of the game. Take possession of NPC's bodies and use their abilities to solve puzzles or access areas that require certain permissions. On paper, this mechanic is very full of potential, and was certainly taken as an inspiration for the old Scrapland from 2004, which was a murder mystery set in a world of robots. At first, Messiah may be quite disorienting, as the tutorials are not very comprehensive and the controls require binding. I personally opted for the classic camera with the mouse behind the protagonist and adjusted the movement and interaction buttons. And once everything is rebinded, the rest is not that complicated. The action button is used for almost everything, from pressing switches to picking up weapons and exiting combat mode. There's also the ability to climb crates or hang from ledges. Platforming will be prominent, but let's dive into something else first. Taking control of NPCs is crucial to progress, and to do so, Bob must first release the current one with backspace key by default. In his angelic form, Bob is defenseless. He cannot attack, and if he tries, he just does a childish finger gun with no effect. Besides, if he's spotted by the military, he can easily be killed with a few shots. Having to figure out how to possess bodies really pissed me off, because it's not explained in the game, and by chance I first possessed one guy by jumping on him from behind. See, depending on the difficulty, the possession con progressively decreases, as does the level of aggression of enemies. And, more importantly, in hard mode, Bob dies along with the possessed person if they are killed, while on normal and easy, he just gets expelled. During fights, with a bit of luck, we can manage to possess someone else, but NPCs in this game are not very resistant. On the contrary, they can be killed easily, even while taking control of them. Many times, I've resolved encounters by possessing the last survivor of a group of enemies. Anyway, on normal difficulty here called Prophet, the game is quite doable, and there are occasional difficulty spikes. But now, let's talk a bit about the different types of NPCs that can be possessed. First, there are military personnel divided into ranks, but also scientists and technicians. And as I said, possessing one means being able to use their ability to interact with certain machines, or having permission to access restricted areas. One thing that struck me is that if we possess a non-military personnel and pick up a weapon, they'll be threatened with throwing it away, since they're not authorized to possess one. That's an impressive touch.
Get the freaking weapon away now! One warning to put that thing down!
And even-hander in combat mode will make the surrounding NPCs angry or scared. Soldiers will order to lower the weapon or leave the combat stance, since we can also fight hand-to-hand. And if we attack someone unaware from behind, we can also silently strangle them. A type of NPC that surprises me for what he can do is the Radiation Worker. Aside being able to enter radioactive areas that would kill anyone without their suits, they can equip the Battery Grabber and grab this radioactive energy battery cell, which will kill anyone unprotected nearby as we carry it around.
What's going on in here?
That's freaking gruesome. It feels like this game has no respect for human life. Oh yes, that was also the first time I had to use an elevator. To make it go up and down, you must press simultaneously the interaction button and the forward and backward movement keys. It feels quite odd. So, to summarize, Messiah is this. Alternating sections where we have to take control of NPCs while remaining undetected by guards, which makes it feel like a stealth game, and others where we simply play as Bob in his angelic form, through platforming segments that also involve flying, or rather gliding using his little wings. One of the first puzzles requires to position 3 fans at the correct height, to allow him to reach the ceiling. Other times we'll have to take control of even rats, in order to move through pipes and even walking on... what the hell are those? Corpses floating in blood. Did I mention this game can be creepy? Yeah? Okay, keep that in mind for later. Well, the idea is there, and execution works. Almost always. Because the NPC AI is pretty unpredictable, and you'll never know when they might catch you or suddenly attack. Now, there are times where the game is indeed brilliant for such mechanics and possibilities, and even lets the player experimenting with different approaches like in the starting area. In this case, I can decide to possess a scientist to access this room. But I can also try a stealthy approach, climbing on these crates as a cherub, avoiding being seen by the guards, and then walking through this green laser that will not harm me. At the same time, there are parts where it's difficult to figure out how to proceed, and others that are very linear and quite unimaginative, like some platforming sections. In fact, I sometimes found them a bit too long and tedious, and to name one in particular that I didn't like, there's the one with the conveyor belts. The first time I thought I'd have to switch to angelic form to overcome those obstacles, but this caused me problems with the surrounding guards, until I realized that I could still do it by possessing someone. Another part I hated is this where I had to use this special weapon to dispose of giant mechanical enemies, which were capable of shredding me like nothing. The best way to deal with them is to use the sniper mod, which permits to inflict localized damage like MDK, but I used it very rarely, also because it's not that useful, except for maybe 3 occasions, while in MDK it was a fundamental mechanic, or rather a weapon in its own right, to get through many parts. One thing that I liked is that whenever an NPC or our controlled character is under fire, crosshairs will appear on the model, and if the next shot is fatal, a skull appears. I must admit that Messiah can be really janky and rough, but it's the kind of jank I love. Back to the plot, Bob's main goal is to reach the world dictator, who calls himself Father Prime, in order to, well, kill him and free the people from his influence. Since the beginning, Bob receives instructions from an unknown entity in the form of messages in his head, explaining the current state of the world and how to proceed to achieve his goal. To succeed, we'll have to navigate a variety of interconnected environments, where we'll also encounter members of the lower class, the Chots from the sewers, who look and act more like beasts than humans. They even practice cannibalism and are at war with the military. In fact, we'll often find ourselves in the crossfire between these two forces. The game can be divided into two parts. The first one in search for Father Prime, and the second against Satan. Don't worry, it's not a big spoiler. As I've hinted several times, Messiah is a strange game with rather macabre undertones, and we can see this in how expendable the people in its world are. I mean, Bob is a messiah that on paper should help people, but instead there's no moral in his actions. He gets even mocked once for his brutal methods, and I found it quite unsettling. For example, one thing that quite shocked me is that if we jump while controlling an NPC from a great height, we can see the poor dude literally break his legs, and then agonize until his HPs reach 0 and die. This game is freaking sadistic. We can kill NPCs in different ways even for the sake of progressing through certain puzzles. Like this one, in which we can chop someone up to fill a tank with blood.
What are you doing in here?
Please separate body parts before insertion into feed mechanism.
That's nasty. As the story progresses, we'll end up entering Sex City, for real, where the game aims to show a depraved and decadent side of humanity. The place is indeed dirty. There are prostitutes, lascivious dwellers and clubbers, pimps, and even the cyber warriors called sub-girls. As you can see, everything is over-sexualized when it comes to female characters. However, there was a lewd little scene that made me laugh.
Ah! She's naked.
It so happened that, out of curiosity, I looked up all the reviews from the time, to see if anyone else complained about the game's slightly transgressive nature, and in the end I found myself agreeing with this older review from PC Gaming World, which I won't cite so as not to waste your time. Let's just say I agree with the points that highlight the grotesque nature of the game, and I wonder what's the real meaning of impersonating a messiah, and then treat all people that you should save as disposable armor, with no real punishment or reward for all these evil deeds. For a moment I even thought this was caused by a lack of proper direction during its long development cycle, which took 4 years from 1997 to 2000 and only 10 people involved. But instead I've discovered that the inclusion of all this twisted stuff was actually envisioned since the beginning. See, there's this old interview by Eurogamer with the president of Shine Entertainment, David Perry, where our man boasted the sadistic content of the game and also said,
In Messiah you can mess around with people, sneak up on them, steal their body, take it for a walk, then leave it in an awkward situation, like on fire with broken legs, and stand back and watch.
He then remarks,
It's an eerie feeling.
and adds,
The sniper mode in MDK blew me away, but the Messiah one feels even better.
not in my opinion.
It's a lot to do with how real everything looks and how accurate the weapon is. You can pop knees, heads, etc. It's crazy stuff.
Mr. Perry. The fuck? Now I think I should spend some words about the graphics and sound, but first I want to explain how to make this game run decently on modern systems, in this case on Windows 10. I've used my retail copy, installed it, applied the official patch and then added the usual digivoodoo. Next, I created a folder called Music, and then downloaded and added this sort of wrapper that emulates the game's audio CD using winmm.dll. Later, I've used the Windows Media Player to extract the tracks from the audio CD, and then move them into the music folder I created. The next step was to convert them into the OGG format, rename them track 02, 03, and so on down to track 34, and, most importantly, remove the metadata. To do this, I first moved ffmpeg.x into the folder, and, to make my life easier, I used a PowerShell command that did everything for me. At this point, I deleted the files no longer needed, and as a final step, I created a shortcut on the desktop, added -i and +! to the target, enabled compatibility mode with WinXP Service Pack 2, and finally the game started without showing a message suggesting to enter the second CD, that contains important audio tracks for a better experience. See, without that, for example, the introductory FMV would remain silent. Messiah, like MDK, was a great graphical achievement. This game was released in 2000, and everything looks great for the time. One thing in particular that we can see as a main feature is the... how to pronounce it? RTDAT technology boasted on the cover, that permits the engine to scale in real time the number of polygons of all characters' models on screen to better suit the player's machine. Anyway, at higher resolutions set via DigiVoodoo, there's a noticeable collateral effect. From afar, NPCs can even look like skeletons, and the closer we get, the more detailed they become. They literally put on weight. We can even display the polygon count in real time by activating a cheat. That's neat. I won't deny that, at first, the strange effect bothered me a bit. Initially, I felt like I was looking at the wobbly models from id Tech2 games like Sin, but over time I got used to it. Another side effect is that effects like flames are not displayed correctly. At one point everyone was on fire, but I couldn't understand anything because the fire was invisible, and I watched my HPs go down without realizing it. On another occasion, I was supposed to see flames setting NPCs on fire, but I couldn't see anything again. People just started to agonize without visual effects. But then, when I replayed this part at native resolution, I could finally see it. What can I say? Satisfying? Another positive aspect of the game is the motion capture animations for each character, which are very realistic. Bob was even animated using mocap on a dwarf actor. This gives the game an extra level of realism, especially the death animations. Just to look at these poor souls being impaled and dying in excruciating pain. Stuck to the walls. Jesus. Now, talking about the sound compartment, well, the overall soundtrack is not bad at all, and both tracks from the industrial metal band Fear Factory, listenable in the main menu and during the fights. And the other tracks, mostly dark ambiental themes, are from Jasper Kidd and Side Effect/Travesty. Listen, I've tried to look for infos about them or him, but I couldn't find anything, so feel free to share anything you know in the comments. Anyway, after reloading the game following a game over, it happens that all the sounds just fade away after a few seconds, but it's easily solved by opening and closing the menu. Instead, in this area where we possess the radiation worker for the first time, all sounds just disappear, and I don't know how to fix the problem except by moving to another location. See? Just like I said. Silence. The overall English dubbing also sounded good for the various NPCs, the creator, Satan, and Bob's childlike voice is perfectly suited. He has few lines outside the cutscenes in which he comments the surroundings, and does occasional grunts, like this curious one for when he bumps into walls.
Oof. Oof. Oof.
Oof. Sounds pretty peculiar, right? So, when I finished the Messiah and watched its ambiguous ending after a truly bizarre final battle, I truly felt I'd played a game that was somehow ahead of its time, albeit with its limitations, jankiness and insane design choices. I mean, more than a holy savior from God, Bob resembles more a Satan's pawn. There's no morality in this game. There's a certain edginess that's almost disturbing, and believe me, I've played the good old Punisher game, which included brutal interrogations. And damn, that was wild. But somehow the gratuitous nastiness in Messiah impressed me. And yes, Shiny used to make crazy unconventional games, but here it reached new heights. I enjoyed the Messiah after all, and I definitely recommend playing it. Many of you may already know it due to some delirious controversies, and perhaps have never looked into it in depth. Thus, if you want to rediscover something distinctive and loony, Messiah is one to try. As always, a warm thanks to all viewers, and see you in the next entry.